Jacob, what happened to your beard? Doesn't matter. Went that way. How many of you have talked to Gen Z recently? I was thinking about it, and I surprisingly don't have a whole lot of Gen Z around me. My ex was Gen Z, and my cousin is Gen Z. But other than those two, that's about it. I don't talk to Gen Z very often. I talk to a lot of millennials, a lot of people older than me, a lot of boomers, and my niece and nephew are Gen Alpha. But Gen Z, they're kind of elusive to me. But when I do interact with them, I always feel like there's kind of something off. And maybe I'm just the only one, but maybe you guys can tell me in the comments down below if you guys notice this, but there's always something a little off about Gen Z, and I suspect it's going to be about Alpha as well. I recently watched a podcast with Jonathan Haidt, who is a professor at NYU. I haven't followed him much lately, but I used to follow him a lot more in college. I've read parts of books he's written. I haven't read any in full, but I really liked his lectures he gave, and I think he really kind of outlines a lot of issues in modernity. He talks about the major impact that social media and smartphones are having on Gen Z. We are basically watching this test unfold in front of us. Millennials are a little different because millennials had a childhood that wasn't steeped in social media and smartphones. I'm kind of on the cusp. I'm 96, so I'm kind of a zillennial. I have kind of like both worlds. I'm not quite a Gen Z, but I'm not quite a millennial either, but I would probably say I identify more with millennial. But we had this childhood that was marked by, playing outside, and we did have the internet. Technology was around. We had dial-up. We have, I think we got high-speed internet maybe in like the early 2000s when I was like 9 or 10, right? It wasn't given to me as soon as I was born, and especially it wasn't given to me in the palm of my hand when I was born. But Gen Z has dealt with that. And one of the issues I think that we're going to see with Gen Z, and Jonathan Haidt talks about this, and I'll show you in the clip in a minute, is that Gen Z is basically eroding the prefrontal cortex, which is used for executive function, and that this is going to have damaging ramifications in society. Executive function is basically planning out how you're going to execute an action. You figure out what the problem is, you figure out what the solution is, and then you execute.
The one thing I can say with some confidence is the fragmentation of attention. This is very general. The one thing the prefrontal cortex does is called executive function. It's the ability to make a plan, say, like this morning, I said, okay, I would need to be here at 9:30, and I thought about the different methods, and I made a plan, and then I stuck to the plan because I have a normal prefrontal cortex. And if you disrupt that, if you're constantly in the early teen years, if you're constantly being divided, you have all kinds of stuff coming in, that part doesn't develop as well. So this is one of the most common comments we hear about Gen Z, is that it's very difficult for them to stay on task.
Professor Haidt has deemed Gen Z the anxious generation, and it's this abundance of social media and technology that is given to them at such a young age that causes them to not be able to plan out the actions they need to take in order to achieve something. This causes a lot of anxiety in people. If you can't even do a simple task such as order pizza, which is something that I've seen Gen Z have a fear of. They have a fear of talking on the phone, right? Something as simple as that. Then of course you're going to be in a position that you can't do anything and you feel helpless and anxious all the time. Gen Z reports higher levels of mental illness, and a lot of them seek therapy and counseling, and a lot of them are even on antidepressants. And I think it's because they cannot utilize their executive function properly because of their social media and technology use. Like I said earlier, millennials had this issue as well, but it's not to the same extent as Gen Z. We all kind of had a childhood that was free of technology, and then technology came out and we started using it and figuring it out together. Well, Gen Z was just born with it, and they said, here you go, here's a cell phone, here's a smartphone, here's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, there you go. And now TikTok, right, which is even quicker dopamine hits than any of the other ones, right? The fast-paced videos, that is eroding people's brains faster than anything other than maybe fentanyl, right? I was in college when TikTok came out, and I'm so glad that I never got on that TikTok bandwagon. Because I think at the time I felt like it was just too much. Sometimes you look at stuff and it comes out and you go, that's too easy. That is too easy and too quick. And sometimes barriers to entry in doing things is actually good. Sometimes it's good to wait, to sit there and take in as much, media as you can. Sometimes it's good to wait until you get home to turn on the TV rather than have it in your face all day. And because Gen Z was born with it and it wasn't something that was new and it came out and we were all kind of learning about it together, like millennials and Gen X and previous generations, they are in this precarious position to where you have these I believe, two groups of people in Gen Z that are people who use technology to just inundate themselves with dopamine hits, and you have people who use technology to better themselves and grow. And these two types of people in Gen Z, and I think future generations such as Gen Alpha as well, these two types of people we're going to see a stark contrast between these two types. Throughout history, you've always had the 80-20 distribution. I believe it's called the Pareto distribution. This is something that's kind of just a fact of nature, right? 80% do 20% of the work and 20% do 80% of the work. And usually the 20%, the top percent of people, those are the Elon Musks, the Zuckerbergs, the rich people of society, the very wealthy, right? And you've always kind of had this is just normal. But I suspect that this is going to be much more saturated in Gen Z because of the technology that they've been given at such a young age. You're going to have people who sit there on their phone all day on TikTok and they get this TikTok rot brain and they can't concentrate in the real world. They can't put anything together. Their executive function is completely eroded. And then you're going to have another segment of people who are using technology to their advantage and they're actually bolstering their prefrontal cortex and their executive function, and they're using it to better their lives and the lives of people around them. It's going to be much more apparent of who in society are the movers and shakers and who are the, for lack of a better term, the slave class. You're quite literally going to have the haves and have-nots. And we also can see that there is a correlation between the mental health problems that is caused by the lack of executive function and people in the type of work they do. As per this article from The Guardian, quote, "We know that people with mental health problems find themselves stuck in low-paid, insecure work." And on top of it, I think the lack of executive function can really cause people to commit crimes more. When you don't have these coping skills that come with the executive function, the ability to actually reason and rationalize problems that you're having, you're more willing to lash out at other people. And I think we can see this in our everyday lives. I mean, look at school shootings or the random acts of violence. I mean, hell, up in Cleveland recently, there was some woman who just took a kitchen knife into a giant eagle and just stabbed some kid in the face. Just random. It just seemed like for no reason. And we also see this with road rage incidents. People just don't have the ability to reason out and cope with what's going on, with the problems that are in front of them. So I think that the executive function has really caused these two big issues in society, and I think it's going to get worse. I think people are going to be more violent, and there's going to be people who can't concentrate, can't read, they can't even assess what's going on in their daily lives, and they can't even execute a plan for the day. It's going to have a lot of ramifications in society, and I think it's going to take us back to some sort of feudalism, where you're going to have the haves are going to be the people running everything, and the have-nots are going to be the wage slaves working at Taco Bell, and they're going to be barely making by because they can't do anything in their daily lives almost. And you're already kind of seeing this in some aspects. I mean, how many people do you know where they sit at home all day, they smoke weed, they work their minimum wagey job, or maybe not, maybe they're on welfare or getting child support or something, right? And then you have the other people, you have other friends who are making six figures and they're doing a lot and they're going on vacations and they're getting married, and it's really sad because I feel like there is this stark split of people. And you know, if you're in one or the other, you know, it doesn't really matter because this is going to affect all of us, right? When you have basically a majority of the population is going to be based like serfs, right? Or slaves, wage slaves, that's going to really have a lot of negative effects on society as a whole. And I fear that there's really no good solution to this, because in the interview, Professor Haidt really doesn't outline a whole lot of concrete solutions. He says we kind of need to come together as a society and basically don't give children under the age of 16 phones. And that is a good idea. I mean, if we can do that, that would be very valuable. But how are we going to get the majority of people on board with that? I don't think that's ever going to happen. Unless it's legislation, right? Unless it's like a law, I don't think that's really going to happen, that people are going to actually follow that, because it's just too many variables involved, and it's just going to ramp up. It's going to keep going. It's going to be easier. Phones are going to get cheaper. Technology is just going to keep expanding. It's going to be ever expanding, and people are never going to want to pull back on it. It sucks to say, but really, I don't know if there is any other solution other than you personally trying to pull back from it and to try and thwart this TikTok brain, right? This erosion of your executive function. Now, do I have TikTok brain? Yeah, I think I do. I think we all do to some extent. But it's really about limiting it as much as possible because you need to be able to think and plan and execute. And if you can do those things, and if you didn't have TikTok and all these technologies in your teen years and you weren't constantly on them and having them alter your brain, I think you should be all right, and you should be able to do things in life and achieve what you want to achieve. Now, if you had the unfortunate experience of having these technologies in your teen years, I don't think it's over for you, or I don't think it's like GG's move on, but I do think you're going to struggle, and I do think there's going to be things that you're going to not be able to concentrate on, and it's going to be a hindrance, and you're going to have to sit there and you have to think things out, and you're going to have to logically go through things. Whereas some people, it might just come natural to them. I think it might be more of a second nature or something you're gonna have to work at. There's a little bit of a black pill today, but if you enjoyed today's video, please give me a like, a comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I will see you all next time.